In St. Paul, some of the well-to-do families lived on top of Dayton's Bluff. Today, however, I'm walking through the neighborhood at the bottom of the bluff where the poorest families lived, in the ravine known as Swede Hollow. Swede Hollow Park is just outside of downtown St. Paul, between the Railroad Island and Dayton's Bluff neighborhoods. I'm starting my walk at the trailhead for the Bruce Vento Regional Trail that's at the intersection of Payne Avenue and East 7th Street. The route I'm walking takes me through Swede Hollow Park to the Eastside Heritage Park. At the Eastside Heritage Park, I'll loop through the park and then return the same way I came, except I'll take the trail on the west side of Swede Hollow Park. This route is a little over 2 miles long and can be completed in an hour or less. If you want, you can certainly extend your walk on the Bruce Vento Regional Trail. On the south end of Swede Hollow Park, you can continue on the trail into the Bruce Vento Nature Sanctuary and into the lower town area of downtown St. Paul. From the Eastside Heritage Park, you can continue on the Bruce Vento Regional Trail to the Lake Phalen area and beyond. This enables you to extend your walk for as long as you like. My walk today is on the Bruce Vento Regional Trail. Starting at the East 7th Street Trailhead, we'll walk through Swede Hollow Park to the Eastside Heritage Park. Other than the parking lot, the East 7th Street Trailhead has no facilities, but the Eastside Heritage Park is also a trailhead, and it does have a picnic area, a shelter, and restrooms. The trail is paved and in very good condition. As we walk to the Eastside Heritage Park, we'll gain about 100 feet of elevation. This entire walk is about an hour, but the video is just the highlights. I hope it inspires you to stay active by walking trails like this one and to keep learning as you age. I hope something I talk about sparks your interest. Check out the resources in the description to further explore those topics. The bridge ahead is called the 7th Street Improvement Arches. It originally carried East 7th Street over the railroad tracks for the St. Paul and Duluth Railroad. Do you know what is so significant about this bridge? For now, I'm just going to walk through the tunnel. On the way back, we'll take a closer look. After you emerge from the tunnel, you've left the city behind and entered a hidden valley. We're walking along the bottom of that valley. The surrounding streets are as much as 100 feet above us. That leaves Swede Hollow Park isolated from the surrounding neighborhoods. A word of caution here. If you enjoy solitude, Swede Hollow Park offers a feeling of solitude that you just can't get in a park near the center of the cities. However, some walkers, because of the isolation, may feel unsafe in the park. In that case, enjoy this video of my walk and then explore the park using the resources in the description. The water you see is a recreation of Phelan Creek. Phelan Creek originally flowed out of Lake Phalen, ran through Swede Hollow, and then emptied into the Mississippi River. But by the 1930s, the creek had been completely diverted underground into a large sewer pipe. In the 1970s, a stream bed with an upper, middle, and lower pools was created to simulate the creek that once flowed through the valley. Instead of water from Lake Phalen, an inlet brings in stormwater from nearby parking lots. Having water again in the park has helped attract birds and other wildlife. Phelan Creek, in addition to flowing through the valley, also flowed through a community. Starting in the 1840s, trappers, laborers, and others built small, simply constructed shacks along the banks of the creek. Later, by 1860, as they moved out, Swedish immigrants moved in. The valley became known as Svenska Dalen, the Swedish Valley, or Swede Hollow, the name we know it by today. The homes were built of scavenged materials and did not have running water, electricity, or indoor plumbing. Some built their outhouses on stilts right over Phelan Creek. No city streets ran through Swede Hollow. By the 1880s, about 600 people lived in Swede Hollow. The population peaked in the early 1900s when about 1,000 people were living here. The immigrants readily found employment in the East Side's breweries and manufacturing plants, or with the railroads. In Swede Hollow, the immigrant cycle repeated over and over. Immigrants, at first from Sweden, arrived at Union Depot in downtown St. Paul. They found their way to Swede Hollow, perhaps by following the railroad tracks into the valley. When they found a vacant shack, they moved in. As they found jobs and started earning money, they moved out of the valley and into the surrounding neighborhoods. And then the process repeated itself as new immigrants arrived. Swedish immigrants first lived in this valley. In later years, Italian, Irish, Polish, and Mexican immigrants followed them. By the 1950s, 14 families still made their homes in Swede Hollow. Because of the unhealthy conditions, no running water, no electricity, no sanitary sewer, the city evicted those remaining families from Swede Hollow and moved them to other housing. By 1956, after nearly 100 years, no one lived in Swede Hollow anymore. Shortly afterwards, the fire department lit the houses on fire and burned them all to the ground. Today, little remains to remind us of the people who once lived here. You may see a lilac bush or daylilies that someone once planted in their garden, or you may see rocks that once supported a porch or were part of a foundation. For a while, Swede Hollow was used as a landfill, a place to dump the debris from highway construction. For nearly 2 decades, the city debated about what to do with Swede Hollow. Finally, in 1973, the city designated Swede Hollow as a park. The St. Paul Garden Club turned the park into the nature preserve we see today, and won an award from the Garden Clubs of America for their work here. We're now leaving Swede Hollow Park, but we're still on the Bruce Vento Trail. On the right side of the trail, we're passing one of the possible employers for the new immigrants, the Hamms Brewery. Brewing began on this site in 1860. Theodore Hamm acquired the brewery 5 years later and eventually built it into the state of Minnesota's largest brewery. In the 1950s and 60s, the Hamms Brewing Company acquired breweries in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Baltimore, and Houston, making it one of the nation's largest brewers. After 100 years as being a family-owned business, the Hamm family sold the brewery in 1965. For the next 30 years, through a succession of owners, beer continued to be produced at this location. Production, however, finally ceased in 1997. If you're like me and grew up in the 1950s and 60s, you probably remember the Hamms Bear. After World War II, Hamms hired an advertising agency to help take the beer from a regional brew to a national brand. The humorous ads they created featured a cartoon bear, a woodland scene with a lake, and a catchy jingle. Even today, over 50 years later, I can still remember seeing their ads on our old black and white television. Hamms beer is now brewed in Milwaukee by the Miller Coors Company. For the last few years, it's been one of the top growth brands in the budget beer segment. After the brewery closed in 1997, it sat abandoned for many years. Lately, microbreweries, distilleries, and other businesses have moved into the buildings. A good portion of the old brewery is still vacant. Although the buildings are structurally sound, they are in a state of disrepair. The Hamms Brewery wasn't the only brewery in the area. 3 other breweries once lined the bluffs above Phelan Creek and Swede Hollow. The Hamms Brewery, however, was the most significant of those, and the only one that has survived until today. Since we left the East 7th Street trailhead, we've slowly been climbing out of the valley. We're now about to go up to the street level. Just ahead, the trail splits into 3 branches. The branch on the left takes you to Arcade Street. The middle branch is the continuation of the Bruce Vento Trail. It takes you to Phalen Boulevard. From there you could walk to the Lake Phalen area, although it would be a bit of a hike. We, however, took the branch on the right. It takes us directly into the Eastside Heritage Park. Since you can't see the park from the trail, that sign lets trail users know that there are a restroom and a picnic area to their right. The Eastside Heritage Park was once part of the Hamms Brewery complex. It wasn't a park then, but the location of the brewery's grain elevator and malting facility. Unlike the buildings we just passed, the grain elevator and malting facility have been demolished. The east side of St. Paul has an extensive network of walking and biking trails. These signs help trail users find their way to other popular destinations. Although I don't quite see it, the buildings in the park, and especially the way they're arranged, are intended to remind us of the immigrant settlement in Swede Hollow. The Eastside Heritage Park contains 2 interpretive kiosks. The kiosks highlight some of the individuals who have contributed to society either at the local level or at the national level. They also highlight some of the businesses and industries that have made this part of St. Paul their home. We'll loop through the park to the second kiosk before heading back to the East 7th Street trailhead. The Eastside Heritage Park commemorates some of the individuals who came from the East Side and rose to local or national prominence. People such as Herb Brooks, the ice hockey coach, Warren Burger, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and many others. I've also been mentioning Bruce Vento. Do you know who Bruce Vento is? Congressman Bruce Vento represented the east side of St. Paul in Washington, D.C. for many years. He was very active in environmental issues. In the year 2000, while still in office, he died from lung cancer. Bruce Vento grew up on the East Side. Before entering politics, he worked in the Hamms Brewery and in the Whirlpool plant. The two information kiosks are on opposite ends of the park, and I'm now approaching the second one. I walked the trail along Phalen Boulevard between the two kiosks. The panels on both kiosks provide a lot of information about the history of the East Side. However, some of the panels look like they've fallen victim to the weather and are difficult to read. They are, however, available online. Check the description for the link. The park also highlights the businesses that, for a while, made the East Side their home. These include the 3M Company, Whirlpool, and others. 3M is probably the most recognizable to us today. It was originally founded in Two Harbors, Minnesota. In 1910, it moved its operations to the east side of St. Paul, a short distance from here. Up until 1925, sandpaper and abrasives were the main products of the company. In that same year, it started developing a masking tape. 2 years later, in 1927, it started marketing the tape under the Scotch brand. 3M's investment in research and development led to many new products. In 1952, to provide space for expansion, 3M purchased land in Maplewood, Minnesota. In 1955, it opened its first research and development lab there, and then moved the corporate headquarters to the site in 1962. By the early 2000s, the buildings on the east side of St. Paul were functionally obsolete. In 2009, 3M ended all operations on the east side. The St. Paul Port Authority has now redeveloped 3M's former site into the Beacon Bluff Business Center. That completes our loop through the Eastside Heritage Park. I'm now going to return to Swede Hollow Park the same way I came. I'm now back in Swede Hollow Park again. Here at the north end of the park is a sculpture called Swede Hollow Henge, or just Swede Henge. I believe the post in the center is an old curb gutter with a cutout for the storm drain. I'm not sure about the other rocks. Some look like they could have been part of a stormwater system too. The Drury Street pedestrian tunnel, the tunnel you see in the background, enters the park at Swede Hollow Henge. The tunnel is one of the other entrances to Swede Hollow Park. It takes you up to Drury Street and Payne Avenue. We're now walking back to the East 7th Street Trailhead on the west side of Swede Hollow Park. On our way to the Eastside Heritage Park, we were on the trail on the east side of Swede Hollow Park. The trail on the west side is the actual Bruce Vento Trail through the park. It follows the old rail bed of the St. Paul and Duluth Railroad. The Bruce Vento Trail is a multi-use trail, so expect to share the trail. It's most popular with bikers, and they're the primary users of the trail. These valleys, like Swede Hollow, were very important to the railroads. The city of St. Paul is surrounded by bluffs. Dayton's Bluff, Ramsey Hill, and even downtown St. Paul sits atop a bluff. The valleys provided a gentle gradient to get trains up from the Mississippi River to the north and west of the cities. Although this valley is no longer used by the railroads, the valley just to the west, on the other side of Railroad Island, the Trout Brook Valley, is still used by the railroads. Along the trail on the west side of the park, there's a parking area for bikes, and at that location there's some stairs that go down to an observation deck that's much closer to the bottom of the valley. If you go down, there is a primitive trail that runs from the observation deck into the woods on both the north and south sides of the deck. I haven't walked these primitive trails, so I'm not sure what to expect or what you'd see if you would walk them. I'm now back at the 7th Street Improvement Arches. Did you figure out what is unique about this bridge? This plaque from the American Society of Civil Engineers notes that this bridge is a National Historic Civil Engineering Landmark. It was built in 1884 to connect downtown St. Paul to the Dayton's Bluff neighborhood. Unlike bridges that cross railroad tracks at a 90-degree angle, this bridge crosses the tracks at a 63-degree angle. In addition to pedestrians and streetcars, the bridge carries water and sewer lines, which required an extra layer of fill and added weight. To build this bridge, the engineer chose a skewed helicoidal or spiral stone arch design. This type of bridge is very technically demanding to design because it requires complex mathematical calculations. The stones in the vault are cut with curved surfaces to form parallel spiral courses. While the initial calculations are difficult, the same stone pattern can be used for all stones in the vault. The stone cutters must be very precise. Bridges that use the skewed helicoidal design are very rare. This bridge is the only example in Minnesota and one of a few in the entire United States. The piers and wing walls are gray limestone that was quarried in St. Paul. The vault is a Kasota limestone from the Minnesota River Valley near Mankato. We've now come to the end of this walk. I hope this video inspired you to stay active and to keep learning. Please check out the resources in the description if you want to learn more about the places we visited on this walk. See you in the next video.